Is this the last hurrah for Steph Curry and the Warriors? Welcome in or welcome back. We have another guest today. Super excited. Almost 10,000 followers on Twitter. 1.7 million likes on the same platform. Really trying to keep the spirit of journalism alive here in the social media age. The face and the brain behind GooseTalkSports, Justin Gooseman. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Great intro. Excited to talk some ball, the state of journalism, all of the above. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you coming on. And I wanted to have you specifically because there are some Warriors fans out there in the social media space that I could have had on. But I really wanted to talk to you specifically, not to boost your ego or anything. You were the only Warriors fan that I asked. There was no backup plan for me. It was either going to be you or I was going to do it by myself. So I really wanted to have you on here, if only for how authentic and how serious you take journalism. And as someone who also appreciates standard journalism, what we call legacy journalism, I really couldn't think of someone to have on that was more qualified than you.
I really appreciate that. So I actually didn't get my degree in journalism. My degree is in radio, TV, and film. I wanted to cover the production side. I minored in journalism, and all my work in college was technically journalistic work. Most of it was obviously with video related, but all of it was journalistic work. So I really want to hold up the standards of journalism, but also we're in this space where it's kind of like the fans age. Fans drive content. And so I've kind of meshed the two throughout what I've done with TikTok and then with some stuff in college. But yeah, it's a weird moment, but I appreciate you saying that for me. I'm excited to dive into what this Warriors season is going to look like.
For those who haven't watched some of your content, first of all, what are you doing? Secondly, it's really refreshing to see someone be, first and foremost, a fan, but every piece of content that you deliver, whether it's about the Golden State Warriors or about the Atlanta Falcons, every piece of content that you deliver has this journalistic integrity behind it. Everything I can tell is sourced, and you never put out anything that is very easily falsified. Like, it's so good. And especially in this age where everything's so clickbaity and rage baity, I think that it's very easy to do the opposite of what you're doing. So I really couldn't commend you enough for what kind of product you're putting out.
That's great to hear. I really do appreciate that.
Right before we get into the season preview, I do want to touch on your fandoms here because you do remind me a lot of myself. And shameless plug, I made a video probably 8 months ago now about why and how we become fans. Me personally, I was born and raised in West Virginia, but I'm a Celtics fan. And for a very long time prior to me moving down south, I was a Dolphins fan and I'm an Atlanta Braves fan. So there were reasons why I gravitated towards them. And I would really love to kind of pick your brain about that to see if my video correlates with how you came to your fandoms.
Yeah, so I got the University of Texas gnome behind me, got the Falcons hat, the Falcons helmet, and I'm wearing the Warriors jersey. And how does that all happen? Well, a couple of things. Like, first, I was a Falcons fan, born and raised. Both of my parents are from the Atlanta area, the Georgia area. So my dad was diehard Falcons, and that's what I know. That's what I knew from the second I was born. Now, my dad wasn't a huge NBA fan at the time that I was getting into sports. So I watched a ton of football at the time, and then basketball was kind of something I ventured into on my own. He introduced me to college basketball at a really young age, and my first basketball memory was watching Steph at Davidson. And I was like a 4 or 5 year old kid. All I really remember is sitting on the couch and like that being my first basketball memory. I don't remember the games all that well, but I was fascinated with the sport. I loved the sport. And so as I grew older and I started really getting into the NBA, at the age of about 7 or 8, I became a Steph Curry fan. I started following him through the injuries. I moved to Alaska because my dad was in the military. And so we got a lot of West Coast games. I was able to see a lot more of those games as a young kid than I would if I grew up on the East Coast. So I became a Warriors fan. It's rough timing. It's not great. I will admit it was probably 2 years before the dynasty run. If you want to call me a bandwagon, that's totally fine. My feelings will not get hurt. And then UT, we ended up moving to Texas and I was lucky enough to have good enough grades to get automatic acceptance into the University of Texas. They're a great school, and I knew that we had a chance while I was in school the last 4 years to really grow as a sports program. And so I'm UT through and through now. It's burnt orange all the way through my blood, and that's how I got my fandoms. It's just kind of randomness and association through family, life's choices, I guess, circumstance.
Well, I would like to say that I am 3 for 3 on my cause and correlation from that video there, so I was on to something.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, this is the Warriors season preview, and I feel, based on your answer, Steph Curry is the very easiest favorite player answer for you. But just to kind of get into your cerebrum of the kind of Warriors fan that you are, is there a Warriors player that you think about a lot that maybe other people wouldn't?
I love this question, and I'll actually give you two, and they're more recent. I think one all-time Warriors player that nobody thinks of is Nemanja Bjelica. One season, 2022. He was one of the guys that I couldn't stand when he had to play in the regular season because he was going to get hunted every possession. But he played a couple games in the playoffs where he was super effective in just some really minor roles, being a connective passer as a big man. And in the finals, he had a really good game against Boston, and I'll never forget just like that moment of being, he's a guy that I couldn't stand in the regular season, but in the playoffs, he was just effective enough at a couple of things to make me a fan for life. And then the other is Pat Spencer, who was a Warrior last season, mainly because of his energy, even when he was going into the game down 40 points at the end of the game. I went to 2 playoff games this season. Both were in Houston. I went to game 1 of that series, and I went to game 5. 2 totally different outcomes. Game 5 was a major blowout, but Pat Spencer came in the fourth quarter and was the only guy that had any energy, got ejected from the game because he headbutted Şengün. And I love that energy. And we drive the same car. We both drive a Honda CRV from the mid-2010s, which I think is great cause to like a player. I love his energy. I love his story. Everything about Pat Spencer makes me a big fan.
That's all I needed to hear about your fandom. That is right up the alley here. Not to show any, throw any shade to any sort of content creators, but I do know a Warriors fan that doesn't do content, and their undiscovered or not talked about Warriors player is Steven Jackson, who I also think is underappreciated, especially in those We Believe Warrior eras. But come on, that's stacked. Like,
yeah,
he's not a guy that you can just say wasn't a part of the team.
Yeah, he was disgusting. Like, just because the Warriors weren't a great team back in that era doesn't mean that he was not known amongst the league. He's not some forgotten player, I feel like. So, yeah, I get that. It really depends on who you talk to, what type of undiscovered player you're going to get.
I think that someone who answers Spencer is the ultimate sicko, the kind of people that we need in this space and on this show for sure. So I'm really excited to get into the season preview for you. I don't know how excited you are based on the lack of moves, but let's start foundationally, right? Teams build through the draft. And for the Warriors, because they've been so good, because they've always been in championship contention since Steph Curry has kind of ascended to the point that he's at now, there haven't been a lot of draft picks, really. There were no draft picks this year. And it seems pretty grim. I want to be as fair as possible. You all have your pick for the next 4 years, which, depending on how everything shakes out, could bode very well. On a scale from 1 to 10, where are you at on the panic meter about not having that many future draft assets?
For the draft, for right now, I'm not panicking a whole lot in terms of draft capital, because in my opinion, it should be maximized the end of Steph's career. You need to squeeze every little bit of life you can out of the team that you have right now. So for me, I look at the next 4 years in particular, and I think it wouldn't matter if we had none of our picks. I would rather throw those picks away, go all in, and try and win as much as you can with Steph Curry. Because in my opinion, that's the way that you're going to be successful. When Steph retires, you're not going to seamlessly move into a new era that's going to be a great NBA team. That's not how the league has ever worked. So in my opinion, draft assets right now really shouldn't matter for Golden State. It should be all about what team can we put around Steph? We know we're going to suck when he retires. That's just the state of the league. But how do we maximize this era right now?
I think that's as good of a transition as I could possibly do. There's a reason that that you have this journalism background. The additions also NA not applicable. I think that you can make the argument that Jimmy Butler was the big move, that you could have very easily pushed this through the summer and it still would have happened. How do you feel now that we've seen about half of the season with Steph and Jimmy? How do you feel about him being number 2?
I love him as the number 2. I don't think you can have a better number 2 next to Steph. I mean, their attitudes, their cohesion, the way Jimmy props up Steph. I don't know if we've seen a lot of that from two guys who have been known to be alphas among their career. So I love him as the number 2. It's when I look around them that I'm concerned, because you can have two of the best players in the league and still, if you don't have the depth, it's not going to matter. We saw what they did this season, and obviously I think they can build on that, but I think the roster is still worse heading into this season and more uncertain, that it's really tough to be confident in them making substantial progress off of what they had last season. I felt like with the way the West shook out last season, that was their best chance. You had the Timberwolves, who looked on their heels in the first half when they played against Steph. And then you look at the way the Warriors had played against the Thunder. They had a pretty solid track record heading into what would have been that Western Conference Finals. I'm not saying they would have beat OKC, but this was their best chance, in my opinion, to bring home another one.
Steph is kind of put in the same category of guys like LeBron and KD. If you have one of those players, you have one of these like upper echelon pantheon kind of players, you always have a chance, no matter what's around him, right? So I love Jimmy. I think that he will go down as probably one of the most underappreciated players ever, mostly because he couldn't get it done in Miami. But being able to take playoff Jimmy and add it to the Steph Curry, and not to mention Draymond Green, who still somehow is a phenomenal defender and a great connective piece. I think that when you have those three, you have as good of a shot as any. But I will say, I kind of agree with you. I wish your pieces were a little bit better.
And it's not to say that Golden State won't go into the season and have made some moves. There are still guys available that could sign, but it's just, there's so much uncertainty behind it that I look at the depth around the league, and I don't see Golden State being able to match up for all 82 games and a playoff run. Can they match up in one individual series, one individual game, the in-season tournament? 100%. But it's for 82 plus games. I just don't know if it's possible right now.
Early in the season, there was a conversation to be had about the young pieces on your team, the depth, and how it looked very good. At about the 25 game mark, things kind of shifted the opposite way of, oh, these are very young players. These are very young and inexperienced players. Do you think that taking that many lumps after the fact, 60-ish games, do you think that those lumps could really develop the players that you have on your bench and through your depth? Or is this something more of a sink or swim moment for them that they could not come out on the other side?
It felt like last season to me was the sink or swim moment, but you look at the roster now, and they're going to get another chance inevitably. If, Moses Moody is going to get playing time this year. Jonathan Kuminga, if he's brought back, if he doesn't hold out, is going to get playing time this year. I thought last year was an inflection point. I thought we needed to see a lot of growth from Moses Moody, and there were stretches where it was like, okay, this is an elevated version of a Gary Payton II. He can space the floor a little bit more. He can drive an attack. He can connect with playmaking ability. And Jonathan Kuminga, unfortunately, still just looks extremely raw. Moments of greatness. He'll have 25 points in a game that's 75% from the field. He's 3 for 5 from 3. And you're like, wow, that was a phenomenal performance. But it was the brain farts in crunch time defense. It was not moving on offense in certain moments, or wanting to sit in the corner and shoot threes when you should be attacking the rim. Even if you're not the one shooting the ball, you have the athleticism to go and grab that board, which is what Steve Kerr has wanted from him for so long. So I thought it was a sink or swim moment, but it could also develop him. I have no idea how that's going to play out because I just don't know what is going inside Kuminga's head. And then Moody, as much as I think he's a much more centered person, I think he can bring himself to earth rather quickly from daunting moments. He just didn't show enough in the playoffs to show me that he's a reliable rotation player.
I think something that's interesting about the Warriors is that they very much did try the two timelines thing. And there were some successes like Jordan Poole and then some misses like James Wiseman. As a basketball fan, I understand at that time not having the foresight or the knowledge that Steph Curry was going to be this ultimate Iron Man like he has been, because that was 4 or 5 years ago. This could have very easily just been Steph's getting ready to retire in like 2 years. We need to brace for impact. And then they tried something, and then it turns out, hey, Steph's going to play for another 3 years probably. Oops.
And that's what it feels like to me. It felt like they thought, okay, Steph had a major hand injury. We're coming out of COVID. We don't know what's going to happen with Klay Thompson, how he's going to look. Draymond's been harboring a much larger load on defense than we thought he was going to over the last few years. Let's try and bank on these young guys now and hope that they pan out. And I don't think that's how that ended up going. I think everyone realized in 2022, oh crap, Steph and Draymond still have it. Klay is still serviceable. And now we don't have room for these guys because we tried to bring in some more rotation players who ended up being more polished, and they got roles like Otto Porter over Kuminga. And then it just hasn't worked out since. And now you need to rely on those guys, but they just don't have the reps and the confidence because they weren't relied upon earlier in their careers where they might have in other situations.
Speaking of Kuminga, just to give you, the viewer, a little bit into inside baseball, I wrote our outline that we're reading off of 2.5 weeks ago. And at the time I said, at the time of recording, there has been no Jonathan Kuminga news. 2.5 weeks later, there's still not any Jonathan Kuminga news. So from afar, this seems like a very unfortunate, drawn-out saga. You're obviously closer to it than I would be. Is this something that is just like grinding on you? Is this something that's like gritting your teeth? Or are you just kind of ready to be, done with it and wash your hands of it?
I largely have just kind of gotten over it, and I accept that this is going to be the status quo because I remind myself that at the end of last season, it's not like it felt like he wasn't even on the roster anyways. So does this matter if this draws out 40 games into the season? He's not going to be getting paid. So we already saw what the roster was going to look like without him on the floor in regular season games towards the end of last season. So I kind of have just accepted, like, this is going to be how it is. Unless he agrees to take less money, the Warriors are not budging on this. I know Steve Kerr. Mike Dunleavy isn't Bob Myers, but it feels like he has dug his teeth in, and he's not going to budge. So I don't think anything's going to happen. And I frankly, I hate to say I don't care. At this point, I don't care. It's just the status quo.
Partially from like a pure fundamental, a pure like ego-driven standpoint, I sort of understand where Jonathan Kuminga is coming from, because he is comparing himself to other people in the league, right? There has been this report that he wants Jalen Johnson money. He's not as good as Jalen Johnson, but the counter argument could be, well, if the team gave me the ball like I want, if the team gave me the ball the same way that they're giving the ball to Jalen Johnson when Trae Young's not on the floor, maybe I could be. So part of me understands that. But I've also watched him play, and nothing screams borderline all-star, at least at this point in his career. We've kind of touched on it already. Do you believe in his own hype? Do you think that there's a scenario where, whether it's for you or for some other team down the line, that we're looking at Jonathan Kuminga in 10 years as a 4-time all-star? Or is all of this being concocted in his own mind?
I do still think there's something there. I look at his ability and I look at his frame, and there has been progress over the years. It's just marginal, and it's really tough to see unless you're plugged in on every Warriors game. When I watched him defend Luka a couple times this season, I was like, oh my gosh, he's the only guy in the league that I actually think can line up opposite of Luka and legitimately slow him down. He did it back in 2022 when he would come off the bench for Andrew Wiggins in that series. That was one of the only series Kerr really trusted him in. And, I watched some of those things and I'm like, man, he really could be that guy. I don't think a situation like Golden State was for him. He needs to be in a situation where he can mess up 20 times a game if he needs to. Like if he was in Atlanta where they were mediocre for the last 3 seasons and he did have Jalen Johnson's role, I think there's a chance that we're having the same conversations about Kuminga that Jalen Johnson is having right now. Unfortunately, that's just not the way his career has played out. So like you said, I totally get where he's coming from. If I was in his shoes, I would be so angry because I know that in 2 years, Steph is going to be showing his age a lot more. Jimmy is going to be showing his age a lot more. So I need to have that money now because I know that I'm going to be in that spot in 2 years. But I just don't think the Warriors are going to do that.
Let's assume, best case scenario, someone checks his ego. He sits down with the Warriors brass and goes, listen, that's on me. I am willing to be a part of this team, whatever it takes. In my mind, I have a perfect role for him. But what do you see being the perfect fit for him on this team?
The perfect fit for him on Golden State is as a guy that can play in the dunker spot, like Gary Payton II. If we ask Kuminga to play the perfect role for Golden State, it would be Gary Payton II on steroids. It would be do everything that he did in 2022, except do it at a higher level. Attack the rim on missed shots, on every single time you touch the ball, you should be getting a paint touch, whether it's posting up, whether it's driving to the rim. He also has to be a better playmaker because everything can't be about him when he touches the ball. When you drive to the rim, you notice as he drives, guys collapse almost every single time because he drives with so much ferocity. But he doesn't have the vision to make the kick to the corner. And to me, if he was going to be the perfect guy, he has to be able to play in the post position. He has to drive to the rim, and he has to be a much more elevated passer. 20 points per game probably isn't his best role on the Warriors. It's probably a 16 point per game, 10 rebound, but 8 assist guy as well. And I just don't see him really taking that step.
When he was drafted to the Warriors, obviously I saw his G League Ignite tapes. And while he was very explosive, he was a great athlete. I kind of viewed his menteeship with Draymond being potentially the best move that he could have made if he could have just latched on to Draymond. Because I like you said, you see his ability to slow down some of the biggest superstars in the league. And honestly, I think a lot of that is just raw defensive potential. I could be wrong, but Jonathan doesn't strike me as very cerebral at this point in his game. It doesn't seem like he's studying a lot to cut off different angles and be better positioned. That's just raw talent. So the fact that he can do that on, let's call it, a lack of discipline when it comes to studying the game that way, if you were able to latch on the Draymond where he could teach you the tricks of the trade, I feel like we could have been looking at someone like a Kawhi light, but instead, so far, it looks like we get a Patrick Williams clone.
Yeah, a Shaden Sharp highlight level guy that just doesn't have all of the tools. And I noticed, like you said, I agree he's not the most cerebral, but there are times, again, every single time he plays Luka, and I don't know when I first noticed this, he studies Luka's game for whatever reason. There's a personal grudge there. He wants to win that matchup because there were a couple times where you would see a switch where Moses Moody was guarding him or Draymond was guarding him, even Wiggins at times. And Kuminga, after a play, would come over and give the instruction on how to guard Luka. And I noticed that a couple of times when they've played over the last couple of years. And so there are moments where I'm like, man, if you took every game as seriously as like that one matchup, you'd be a top 25 player in this league easily. But as of this moment, he just doesn't have that switch to flip for a regular season game against Charlotte.
Yeah, I'll honestly kind of think that just comes with time. And just based on how this offseason has went, it doesn't seem like the Warriors will be able to reap the benefits of that. There was a report that the Kings wanted to do a sign-in trade where the Warriors would have gotten like Malik Monk and somebody else. And I feel like that would have been great for the Warriors, obviously, but Jonathan Kuminga just doesn't want to play ball. And again, based on just like pure ego, I understand not wanting to accept that because they have Debo and they have Zach LaVine and they have all these guys that need the ball in their hand. He would be in a similar situation to what he's in now. But I also understand not accepting the Golden State offer of 2 years, $45 million with a team option for the second year because you want to be in that long-term security portion for monetary value. So I think, unfortunately, until probably until a week before the season, I would imagine him and Cam Thomas and Josh Giddey all just agree to sign the qualifying offer so they can be unrestricted free agents next year, and then we can finally go, we're done. This is over.
And even then, I don't think the Warriors are going to be saying we're done, this is over. They're still going to be looking to shop him throughout the season. You're going to hear reports from the moment he signs the qualifying offer until the trade deadline if a deal doesn't get done. It's just the unfortunate state of the situation for Jonathan Kuminga. I don't know really what else there is to say on it.
Speaking of unfortunate, in all these other episodes that I've done so far, I ended this portion with, well, we've had a lot of fun talking about the additions for this season, but it seems like more misery than anything. To add on to that misery, we do have to talk about one departure in Kevon Looney. And I certainly didn't consider him to be like this warrior for life, like I view as Steph or Draymond or Clay. But I will say it is going to be very weird to see him in anything other than a Warriors uniform. Other than the obvious rebounding, is there something that he brought to the team that you're going to miss as a fan?
I think his ability to be just kind of the centerpiece of the team, his presence was just always calming on the floor. I felt like it wasn't necessarily anything basketball related that he did other than being 100% in his role all the time as the rebounder, that I think it calmed Steph down at times. I think it calmed Draymond down at times because you knew you had your rock. Even if he wasn't going to go put up 25 points per game, you had the guy down low that was going to go to battle with whoever the opposing big was. Didn't matter if it was Jokic, Zubats. He was going to own up to the fight and do everything he could in his power to win his matchup. So I think that's going to be what's missed more than anything, is just his presence on the floor in the locker room.
Well, we certainly will miss a former future Kevin Durant in the Bay for sure. Now that we have kind of previewed the season, just as a general overview, what are your realistic expectations for the team?
Man, I expect around the same result as this past season. I think there's probably a hot start in there for the older guys, Jazz, to start the season. There's 100% going to be a letdown in the second 20 games or so that's played. And I think they end up about around the 7, 8, or even 9 seed once again. I think they're going to be in the play-in just because of the construction of their roster, especially with your cornerstone guys being the age they are. They're going to miss time. So I think best case scenario is like a 5 or a 6 seed. I think worst case scenario is down to like the 11 seed. I think there's a world where someone gets hurt and the Warriors cannot overcome it because they don't have enough depth and they miss out on any postseason action.
Had it not been for the Luka Doncic trade, I don't think that I would ask this question. But because anything is now possible, I don't think they would ever trade Steph. But do you see a scenario if they're like, call it 7, 8 games under 500 at the trade deadline, that they just blow everything up, still keep Steph probably, but really ultimately retool around him?
In a world without the second apron, there would be. I think now with the restrictions on roster construction, you can't really blow it all up and retool in under a season. You have to build from the ground up, or you have to make moves in the margins that make you better. I think there's a higher likelihood that they trade Steph than that they blow it all up and try and retool without Draymond, without Jimmy, something like that. I think there's a higher likelihood that they trade Steph than try and go all in another direction.
Well, believe me, you don't have to tell me about the second apron. When it comes to the second apron, you only get worse when you're trying to avoid it. I mean, we went from having Kristaps Porzingis, who had tons of problems and was injured throughout all of last year. We went from Kristaps Porzingis as our starting power forward to George Niang, and now it's going to be Xavier Tillman potentially. Who knows? So you can only get worse when you're trying to avoid the second apron. I definitely agree there.
It's brutal. There's not a whole lot of flexibility anymore. And I don't know if I'm for it or against it. I think there needs to be some change, but it really is so tough to avoid to try and sustain success.
I definitely agree that there needs to be something. There can't be this wild, wild west. There can't be no salary cap. There's got to be something. But I feel like we have spent enough time with the second apron and all of the penalties that come with it to know that this is not it. So, CJ, I'm glad you're not the I'm glad you're not the president anymore, because you couldn't have messed that one up anymore.
Yeah, and it was built off of a total lie, but that's a whole nother conversation that we can get into another time.
Well, a little bit of a melancholy end to the season preview for the Warriors, but I do like the realistic approach, and best case scenario, if you outperform, your mood's lifted a little bit.
Exactly.
If you're a 5 seed, you go, hey, we did pretty good this year.
If we're a 5 seed, I'm ecstatic. I'm going into the playoffs saying we got a chance against anyone.
I'd like to take this opportunity now again to say thank you for coming on. Really do appreciate it. I do at the end of these videos what I'm calling, I could probably come up with a better name, couldn't think of one at the time, a content corner, where I bring content creators on and really kind of pick their brain and understand your why. So if you could just explain to everybody watching, what was your start on this content creation jersey? Was there a nexus point? Was it a conglomeration of things? Let me know.
I got started doing content actually because a guy in my high school had started an NFL account, and he wanted me to start an NBA account to go along with it. And then I ended up posting a lot more. His end sort of died off. I had built up a decent following, and I decided to kind of rebrand it into my own. And then I ended up going to college and doing a lot of sports journalism, a lot of content creation at school. And so while I wasn't always the most consistent on TikTok, I was always making content for something. So it's just been kind of a constant in my life for the last 4 or 5 years, just doing out of habit. If it ever becomes something big, then that's great. If not, then it's just something that I enjoy doing for a hobby and talking sports and that sort of thing.
Now, we've mentioned it a couple times throughout this episode about your journalistic background. Why is traditional journalism, why is legacy journalism so important to you?
I think we're at this weird point right now where a lot of media is very sensationalized at all ends. And I think traditional journalism is very important. I also think there is room for fan content and for biased content, and understanding the fan is important to making content. So I think even though I value traditional journalism at a very high level like I do, I also think it's important to recognize the industry is changing, and you have to be able to kind of go along with that change and understand, how can I make content that sort of understands, like, I want to be unbiased, but at the same time, I understand that these fans are frustrated about something and they have every right to be frustrated. So I'm going to be animated. I'm going to make a hot take or say something emotionally charged because that's how those fans feel about it, and that's how I feel about it. So that's sort of where I stand with that. But at the same time, journalism and the standards should not be disrespected or disregarded, because you need to report fact and truthful information, and all of your opinions should be guided by that.
Yeah, absolutely. I hold journalism in the same kind of standard and regard as you do. For a non-basketball reason, I feel like, without touching on it too much, over the last, say 8 years, the lack of journalistic integrity has really shown through in everything that we do, whether that's pop culture or politics or sports or whatever. And I wish that we could swing the pendulum back a little bit. And I think it's going to take people like you to do that. So I really can't explain to you how much I appreciate you being in this space as a positive note.
Thank you. And you highlighting that and recognizing that also shows that I think it is possible to try and swing the pendulum back that other direction. I think people want that right now, and I think there's room for it in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. We are aspiring content creators. Are there some content creators, and it doesn't have to be sports related if you don't want it to be, but are there creators that inspire you, or is there someone that you admire in this space?
In the TikTok space, there are a few main ones. I think D. Lee, for three, makes some of the most highly intelligent basketball videos that I've seen on TikTok. I there aren't a whole lot of creators that I'm like really getting on my phone to watch all the time, and his videos are always informative. I love them. So I try to learn from what he's doing and try to make videos that are similar. And then, anyone that is willing to take risk with their content, like, jumping into YouTube and other platforms, I always encourage. So I think another one is Jokic Joestar, who, although he's got the following, he doesn't need anybody to shout him out. I think his content is flawless, and I've been loving what you're doing as well. So there are many more that I would name, but those are a few that I tried to learn from and emulate a little bit in my own videos if I can.
I appreciate that. I will always take the opportunity to be thrown into guys and other content creators who are doing it, who will have the platform already. So thank you. I really appreciate
Of
that.
course.
What is something that if a young or an aspiring content creator came up to you, if they asked you for one piece of advice, what would it be?
Do absolutely everything, say yes to everything. If you're in high school, college, just getting out of college, if you have opportunities around the content space that are different, unique, maybe not your niche, do them. You have no reason not to. You're going to learn from them. In college, I did everything from TV to print to broadcasting live games, making TikTok content. Do everything you absolutely can. Get in a control room if you have the facilities for that at a high school or college level, because it's going to make you the most well-rounded content creator you can be. I don't necessarily put all the effort into my TikTok videos that I probably should, mainly because it's kind of just an open and chat thing for me. But at the same time, if you're really aspiring to make the best content you can, take every risk possible.
I think making yourself uncomfortable is ultra important in anything that you want to do, whether that you're an artist, a painter, if you're trying to create content, if you're a singer, even if you are in just a regular 9 to 5 job. I think that making yourself uncomfortable is super important. So I really couldn't agree more. Like you said, you have to try everything because you don't know what you're good at yet. And if you say yes to everything, not only are you going to develop different skills, but other people are going to start to notice that. They're going to be able to rely on you because you are dependable, because you are willing to say yes.
100%. Showing up is the most important thing. Like, you have a Tuesday 8 a.m. lecture, go to class, show up. The professor will see your face. They're more inclined to get to know you, to help you out on things. Like, every facet of life, I think showing up and saying yes to things is important. I think there's no reason not to, and you're going to learn a lot more from doing that than not.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a couple different answers for this last question here. Really interested to see what you have to say. For this upcoming season, we're about 50-ish days away from tip off. Do you have any content goals for the upcoming season?
I think content goals would be to really form an audience of people that specifically watch my videos and have like engagement with my videos, because I think to other online creators, and I think they have an audience that looks for their videos every time they open the app. I'm not going for a specific following count or um, engagement goal, but I think building an audience that really is like, oh, he makes funny or good content after games. I want to watch his videos after a game and engage with his videos after a game. I think if there's one thing I would like to get better at, it's trying to build a consistent audience over a large audience, because I think the tendency is to kind of lean into some of the sensationalized opening lines or hot takes to try and have great numbers. I would rather have consistently decent numbers than randomly great, I guess, is sort of the goal.
To kind of piggyback off of that, if you are watching this and you're an aspiring content creator, I think something that's really important to understand is how big an actual number is. Like, for instance, I posted a video right before we hopped on. I haven't checked the analytics on it yet because we're doing this episode. But the one that I posted earlier in the day got like, I don't know, it's like 400 or 500 views. It's probably got like 40 or 50 likes. pretty decent run, especially for the content space. Some people could look at that, like say if Yoke's Joestar looked at that and go, "Wow, I bombed on this video." But for me, that's 50 people. That's a pretty good chunk of people. So it could be a sliding scale, but to understand that the 500 people that watch your video, or say you pop off and have a couple thousand, those are real human beings that, at least for enough time to trick the algorithm to give you a view count, thought that you were interesting enough, and that should be commended. So when you look at those numbers, it's really easy to get down on yourself, but never downplay what that actually is. I get the YouTube analytics every month, and last month wasn't so good. I'm not going to talk about that, but my YouTube analytics are usually like, it's this video did well, and this is your best performing video, and 6,000 people tuned into you this month. And it's really easy for me to go, well, 6,000 people looked at me, but I don't have 6,000 subscribers. That's a shit ton of people. And people shouldn't discredit that.
And the way I look at it is like, if you went to school with 400 people and 25 of those people liked your video, or 25 of those people were your friend, that's a pretty good ratio. You're not looking to go 400 for 400. You're not trying to be friends with everyone, get every single person to like your video. If you have 25 friends out of 400 people at school, you got a lot of friends. So yeah, I do my best not to even look at the number of views. Maybe I'll tune in to see like, hey, how many people am I retaining for this long? What can I learn from that? But at the same time, a lot of it is luck. A lot of it is like, okay, the algorithm, for whatever reason, pushed out this video when the like ratio was 1 to 20 versus this video that had a like ratio of 1 to 5, and it didn't do very well. It's some of it's luck. So I try and just keep a positive mindset about that. I think things normally take care of themselves in the long term.
For sure. The one last little bit of friendly content creation advice before we move on to arguably my favorite segment. Luck has so much to do with it, but you'll never get lucky if you don't keep posting.
100%.
Don't give up. You're right there.
100%.
Appreciate you coming on. Again, I can't be more complimentary of what you do in your space. I'm glad that we're mutuals. Really glad that we can call each other friends. I want to move on to my favorite segment so far in all of these content creator videos I've done. And for the people who are watching at home, I give all of my guests outlines to go over. That way, we can kind of hone in on our thoughts and not misspeak or be misquoted or anything like that. However, in the lightning round, I keep all of those to myself just because I like to have some fun. So it's 5 questions. You can give elaborated answers. You don't have to. First thing that comes to your mind, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Warriors era, you wish you could have watched live.
Oh, we believe. I was 5 years old. I wasn't locked into NBA at that time until the finals normally. I wish that I was around for that. That would have been electric.
Yeah, honestly, it was them or Run TMC. That would have been my second pick for sure.
For sure.
You are a Hook'em Horns fan. Favorite Texas quarterback?
Colt McCoy. Was a big Colt McCoy fan at a really, really young age. I cried when they lost to Texas Tech. I cried when he got hurt in the national championship against Alabama. So it's got to be Colt McCoy.
NBA player who you think would have a great journalism career?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's tough. Dude, I really don't know. I'm gonna have to think on this one. Crap. I feel like the time is ticking. NBA player that would have Karl Anthony Towns. I know people love to clown on him. I think he would be phenomenal as an NBA like journalist, analyst, entertainer on an Inside the NBA show. I think Karl Anthony Towns would be really good.
Great answer, honestly. Atlanta Falcons player who you think could realistically play for the Warriors?
Drake London. Drake London was a really, really good basketball player. Obviously, he would never play in the NBA really, but his athleticism, he could really create space. I've watched a lot of Drake London basketball videos. One of those late night YouTube finds. I think Drake London could hoop.
And now, the inverse, Warriors player who you think could realistically play for the Falcons?
Draymond would be so funny to watch play like a tight end role. I know he did it at Michigan State and it didn't look the best, but you give him a couple years to really lock into football, he would be a fun tight end to watch.
Hard to argue that. His Michigan State tape was a little rough, but I think that now he's got some experience on him. He could show out a little bit.
At the same time, though, now that I think about it, Jimmy Butler did say that he could play in the NFL in that one Team USA video. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Maybe it's Jimmy.
I wouldn't put anything past Jimmy Buckets. Again, one of my favorite players, even though he was busting the Celtics' ass seemingly every other year. So hard to argue Draymond or Jimmy. Again, I know I've said it a lot. Really appreciate you coming on. Love that we were able to get this done. You are TikTok royalty as far as I'm concerned. You also have an Instagram account. Where else can people find you? What else are you working on?
If people want to find me on Twitter, I have a Twitter, Justin_G30. Like Steph, I made the Twitter a long time ago. But I've got some journalism work on there. I've got some just ball takes, football, basketball, whatever it may be. And then aside from that, we're looking to venture into the YouTube space here shortly, but I've just completed a big move. So trying to get settled financially, and just in the area before we advance to that, but that's going to be coming along soon. So really just Twitter, at the moment, and then TikTok and Instagram.
Well, all of those links are going to be at the top of the description. If you're watching this still, make sure that you go give them some love. Before we get you out of here, is there anything else you want to say before we go?
Dude, just thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for putting this together. Wishing you all the luck on the series. And yeah, really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. That's going to do it for me. That's going to do it for Goose Talk Sports. Be kind. Tell somebody you love them. And I'll see you in the next one.
Barely scraping by. Trying to stop puffing. I'm trying to be one of the greats.